This Week in Startups is brought to you by Breather, workspaces and offices designed for growing companies. Visit breather.com/twist and experience Breather for yourself with a free full-day booking. And Carta. Simplify how you manage equity with Carta. To get Carta's cap table software plus a free 409A valuation, go to carta.com/twist.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and I am here with two of my favorite intelligent people to be on the podcast.
Really?
Kim-Mai Cutler is with us. She is a partner at Initialized Capital, and you know her work previously on the social media doing tweet storms about housing and politics and local government here in the Bay Area, a delightful topic if there ever was one, and her long think pieces for TechCrunch. Welcome back to the program, Kim-Mai.
Thank you for having me.
How are things going at Initialized? You guys have raised a new fund, I saw?
Yeah, we did. We closed a fourth fund over the summer, $225 million. Yeah.
Wow, very good. And you're putting that to work. Ryan Carson is back on the program. He's been on the program 5 times.
I'm back.
He's back. He's, of course, the founder of Treehouse. And you can follow at Treehouse, at Initialized, at Kim-Mai Cutler, M-A-I Cutler, and Ryan Carson on the Twitter. Boy, there's been a lot of news, and we'll stay away from politics for now, but transportation is about to hit it big. Lyft has filed quietly for their IPO, and Uber as well seems to have filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And Uber reportedly exploring a deal to buy 2 electric scooter companies. Obviously, full disclosure, I'm a shareholder in Uber, but I have no knowledge or day-to-day information since I'm friends with the old CEO, not the new one.
Right.
I've never met the new CEO, actually. What do you think, Kim, is the impact of these companies going public? And what do you think of electric scooters? Because there's been kind of this back and forth now of, is this a good business or is it not?
Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of the IPO window, I mean, what was discussed last week was that, I mean, Lyft's filing may have been sort of a preemptive move ahead of Uber, and Uber was really the one perhaps like calling the timing. Like that was what some of the New York Times reporting was suggesting. I mean, I think in terms of like its impact on the Bay Area, my understanding is that a lot of the early employees who would have wanted access to liquidity probably already had some access to liquidity. So it's unclear, what the overall impact will be on kind of the local real estate market here.
Which normally when a company goes public here, you get a number of hundreds of millionaires.
Or thousands,
Or thousands of millionaires and dozens, or maybe a half dozen or dozen billionaires coming out of it, which then drives housing bonkers.
So like during the Facebook IPO, 2012 was a big year in Bay Area real estate. I mean, like housing prices basically essentially doubled very shortly after that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have different headwinds that are happening in terms of overall, the overall set of real estate, interest rates affecting real estate, and then also, the unclear and untested impact of the tax changes last year that affected the state and local deduction, and whether that, is having like a softening effect in the real estate market. So you have a lot of things that are kind of
it's definitely gotten
out.
Soft. The market here for the past year has been flat.
Yeah.
And over 50% of people surveyed in San Francisco said they want to leave. So that's kind of a big...
It's probably because you can't... I mean, it's the cost of living imbalance. Like you combine all the things like what you have, to pay in terms of rent or a mortgage. And then if you want to have a family, childcare costs, and then,
bonkers.
Disposable income and all of that combined. It's
not going to get better.
No, but we're seeing a lot of people move up to Portland where we're based.
Yeah.
So I literally have friends who have Uber shares that are moving to Portland.
Kevin Rose, you referred to.
Maybe or maybe not.
No, he's publicly on Instagram every day from Portland.
But the point is that we're seeing a big influx of people who are basically tired of it all down here.
Tim Ferriss, also Uber shareholder, who moved to Austin. Interestingly, no tax in either of those states. State tax.
Right. Interesting.
Do you have income? I thought Oregon had income tax.
No, state. We don't have state tax.
You don't?
I mean, sales tax, but we do have income.
Oh, you do have income tax?
Washington has
okay, so you're
income.
not saving any money by being in Portland.
No, but
The cost of living is what, half?
it's way less. I
A
mean,
third?
we when we chose where Treehouse headquarters were going to be, we could move anywhere in the United States, and we picked Portland. I was on a flight this morning here, and I'm going to go home tonight, see my kids again. So you get all
Hour
the
and a half
access. Yeah, and it's great. Easy.
That's awesome. So it's sort of like
funny.
LA to, it's like LA North.
Yeah, when I've been to Portland, I mean, it's kind of funny because the sort of reaction, the cultural reaction that you get here from like people who've been in the Bay Area a long time, and they're like, "Oh, you're in the tech industry, or you're a techie who moved here." Portlanders feel that about Californians. So if you kind of show up and
don't say you're from
you
California.
look like
That's
you're
bad.
Californian, it might be a problem.
Yeah, they don't like people from California.
No. And it's like it's a running joke, and it's not real. I mean, there is some darker issues going on here around gentrification that are really real in Portland. You're starting to immediately see it happen. Literally where our headquarters is, was the black part of town, and people are getting pushed out. So it's sad actually to see it and be a part of it, but it's a reality, I think.
Unless you own the home, and then it's awesome.
Right.
Like, I know a lot of people in Brooklyn who had bought their homes in like,
good call.
Downtrodden areas, Greenpoint, Bed-Stuy. They were just in there early because they were artists.
Right. That
And they
worked out.
were prescient enough to buy instead of rent.
Yep.
And when gentrification happened, they bought $100,000 lofts that became worth $1 million over a decade, like 10x.
So do you all think that we'll see any startups come out of this wealth being created by the Lyft and Uber IPOs because, early shareholders leave and start companies?
I mean, I can't recall the name of it, but I do believe there's a couple funds or angel groups that are specifically predicated
Josh Moore in
around-
New York,
Yeah.
who was the head of New York, started his own syndicate of 100 Uber employees.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I have a pretty regular influx of Uber employees sharing with me their next idea,
Really?
asking for angel investing, and a number of them in our syndicate at jasonsyndicate.com.
Interesting. All right.
So it's going to have a profound effect, just like Lyft and Airbnb and Palantir, because this is all going to happen at the same time. It's $150 to $250 billion in market cap is going to appear in 2019. And the only thing that's happened is it's sped up. Let's talk a little bit about these scooters. Do you have them in Portland yet?
It's so funny.
Do people hate them in Portland, or do they love them?
It's funny. The people like me that don't use them hate them. And the people that use them love them.
Why do you hate them?
Just because I feel old now, and I think,
like get off my lawn kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, they also seem super dangerous. I know there's like, it feels like there's kids. I'm 41 now, so everybody feels like a kid now. But they're like weaving in and out of traffic, and you're thinking, how have there not been more deaths? I know there's been one, but it's
there's
the most
been a lot
dangerous
of
thing
deaths,
ever.
but I think they probably predate the renting of these because people used to buy them.
Right.
But they're extraordinarily dangerous when ridden in the street.
But
I think a bigger contextual question you want to ask is, are our streets designed well for safety? Which is like,
No.
Americans gave over a lot of their public real estate in terms of their road space to cars in the mid 20th century. And if you look at other cities that, not only say they value different kinds of mobility, but actually obviously prioritize it in their road space. I mean, if you go to
Copenhagen.
if you go to any of the, like there's a sidewalk, there's a protected bike lane that is protected by curb space, and then there's limited road space. So like the whole design of the experience is really oriented around a number of different mode shares. And I think in a larger conversation around mobility and emissions and climate change. I mean, if you look at emissions, 50% of emissions in San Francisco are due to, transportation. And then 90% of that is basically cars and trucks.
Yep.
And so if you look at that tiny, like single digit percentage, like that's Muni, that's BART, that's bikes, that's, that's
Right.
lots of different types of things. So if you actually want to make a meaningful impact on getting closer to, reducing carbon emissions, you actually want to shift the way that you prioritize road space. And
So make it more painful for drivers.
right.
Yeah, and intentionally making it safer for different types of micromobility for short distances that you don't necessarily need a car to
Are
do.
these bike lanes working in San Francisco where, like New York, they put a row of parking spaces one in the second lane from the left, make the first lane from the street, the bike lane, and then attempt to get people to park essentially in the middle of the street in these sort of like painted out curbs. I see in New York it works really well, but here I don't think people are getting it because they're parking in the bike lane.
Yeah. I think it's a really, it takes a lot, like just to get a protected bike lane. I mean, it takes so much advocacy here.
We have a couple though, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are people who've been trying to do like this movement called people protected bike lanes, where they'll show up and kind of create a barrier of humans to kind of it's really cool, and you can join people protected bike lanes. You can
and you take shifts or something.
I mean, just to draw attention and then pressure the city government to create more protected bike lanes. But like every step and every kind of piece of it is, in some sense, it often feels really incremental. So you'll get like 3 blocks of Valencia that gets like a fully protected bike lane. The rest of it is still kind of the same. And so, it's kind of this piecemeal part process. Whereas like if you go, if we went to Vancouver, like you go to Vancouver and it's like a full, there's a full route around the entire
for bikes,
mobility, and then it's protected on both sides by curbs, and it's really kind of pleasant to just take a bike and then ride around the whole of the city.
Right.
And
they got to just do that here. They got to just take
it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of advocacy. And it takes a lot of negotiation. Those things they didn't just happen overnight. They also took like a political effort as well. There,
Bloomberg did it in New York like a maniac. He just took Times Square and he's like, there's no more Broadway on Times Square. He just shut down like half of Times Square, half of Herald Square. It's like you can now sit there.
The other day it was wild walking through Times Square and just sitting for hours, and saying this is fascinating.
And then there's also like the movement to restore parts of European cities to pedestrian only.
Yeah, that's pretty groovy too. But all right, when we get back, I want to know, should Uber buy one of these electric scooter companies when we get back on This Week in Startups? Let me tell you about Breather. We love Breather. If you like to do the work, as I say in my book, you are going to love Breather offices, where you can book not just for a day or a half day, but for a week, month, or even a year from 2 to 50 people. There's no wasted spaces. And if you want to bring your sales team in for a week, you can rent an extra Breather, and no noisy co-working spaces. You get Wi-Fi, cleaning, all furnished. They do all the design consultation and no waiting. You can get into a Breather in a day or 2. If you take a Breather office for a month or more, you will receive free same-day access to the network of over 500 spaces across the US, Canada, and London. So think about that. If you get a Breather office, you get access to all that same-day network of workspaces. It's ideal for growing companies, and their mission is to empower companies with space that helps them meet their full potential with none of the restrictions that hold them back. No long-term negotiating, no long-term leases, and it's your own culture and your own space. You can scale up and down with no fuss, no muss, as your headcount changes. We've been using Breathers all the time for our incubator, and it's going great. Here's a crazy, awesome offer from our friends at Breather. Go to breather.com/twist and experience Breather for yourself with a free full-day booking. So Ryan, if you were here for the day, if you had gone to breather.com/twist, you would get a free day. Kim, you think they should buy, Uber should buy one of these electric scooter companies, Bird?
They bought jump bikes. I have to disclose Initialized.
Oh, you have?
Initialized is an investor in Skip Scooters.
Skip Scooters?
Yeah, which is
the boosted board spin out. Is that right?
Some of the founding team came from boosted boards. Yeah.
Same cap table or?
No.
Is it spin out?
No, they're different companies.
Different companies, got it.
Yeah, we are operating in, Skip is operating in Portland. It's also operating in San Francisco.
Got it. And how is it going, this business?
Yeah, no.
Well.
I mean, I think if there are a number of things that Skip did fundamentally differently than some of the other micromobility companies.
Such as asking for permission?
Such as having a collaborative relationship with a lot of city leaders, which is why, in part, it's one of the two companies that is operating here. And then also, I mean, there's a lot that, that because the founders came from boosted boards, they have a lot of direct hardware experience, which makes for a product that is more like holistically integrated between the hardware parts and the software parts. It makes their devices more robust, less prone to wear and tear, and also, extends the lifespan of the scooters themselves.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Skip is running into some of the same
challenges,
the same device wear and tear.
That seems to be the big thing I read on the interwebs. Yeah. They were talking about the Bird scooters were like getting destroyed in 6 weeks, and that there's a bunch of them in the Oakland Lake. What is it? Lake Merritt?
Lake Merritt. Yeah.
I heard like Lake Merritt has like 100 Bird scooters in them because people are so pissed off they're throwing them off roofs and whatnot. It's bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, I think Skip is generally fairly careful. Like every time you park, you have to take a picture of where you're parking.
Really?
When they submitted the application to the city, there was a design for a device with a retractable steel scooter, which enables parking. I mean, if you look at the Vancouver model, Vancouver bikes in their bike share have retractable steel cables that allow them to park.
Oh, interesting.
Sanjay also really cares about a vision for a successful Skip is one in which not only the riders of Skip love Skip, it's also that the entire community of non-riders also love Skip because it is such a responsible actor that people love, its addition to the city. So, there's also in that process like the discussion of his community board, which is very in line with Bay Area culture because we love community boards here.
Right.
So,
but I have a question. I mean, it seems like every normal person I talk to wants less traffic, would love bike lanes. It'd be great if you had scooter, protected areas. Who is fighting against that? Why can't we get that done? I mean, why are roads still prioritized for cars? And
it takes a lot of effort and political will to make these things happen. Like, I mean, there's lots of things that we would love to have. We would love to have like a great public education system. We'd love to have affordable housing. Those are all things that, people say that they all want. But when it actually comes down to the details of you have to make a decision on a given street about, there is a limited area on that street and you can put parking, you can put micromobility, you can put cars, you can put bus lanes, you can put like HOV lanes, you can put all kinds of stuff. And it's a zero sum, you have to decide to prioritize some modalities and then deprioritize other.
It's any kind of change. I think in a city is just hard, right? Every city is slow to adopt anything unless you have like some maniacal mayor who doesn't care about public opinion. Like Giuliani.
Who is shielded from, who's somewhat cushioned from that given, in the case of Bloomberg, where he had a lot of capital and that external personal capital could probably, assist with, helping, talk to critics or whatever, but in the reality of most cities, like there's an election, there are elections constantly, like you have to maintain, like it's often in that political position, it can be politically safer to do not as much and then choose like one or two priorities that you really want to make a big change on. But then,
you're a fan of the billionaire mayors and the rich mayors as opposed to the career politicians, Kim?
That's not what I said.
I know,
that
I'm
is
joking.
not what I said.
But you do think that there is a plus for them that they can not have to worry about re-election and they have a little bit of resources. So there is some upside to it.
Yeah, I mean, the concern there obviously is that it would be less. Would it look or be less democratic in that sense? If it like less truly democratic.
If only we had a corollary for this. What kind of example could we come up with?
Yeah, but I mean that was a critique or a point made about the Bloomberg administration, like because he had so many personal resources. It wasn't just about re-election campaigns. It was also about like working with advocacy groups and nonprofit groups, that might oppose some of his initiatives.
Yeah. What do you think about these scooter companies? You think it's a good business, right?
Well, it seems like a terrible business, but that's just from the outside because you see them strewn about. It seems like they'd be expensive to maintain. People are going to die. Like there's all these bad things, but you see how many people use them. And the only conclusion you can make is that this has to be some part of the future of transportation, clearly. And I know that Lyft, I was listening to Lyft on the founder on how I built this. He said, Lyft is what we're building is basically, the future of transport. I mean, it's not about cars. It's about all of this. So surely one of them is going to buy, Bird, Lime, one of them.
Yep.
That seems like an inevitability. I just think they're probably bad businesses. and that makes sense to acquire them as an additional capability to offer. They're
Well,
definitely
here's the
going to be
thing.
here.
In Santa Monica, they were making $20 a day, $20 a day per scooter. And that was just at the start. So you know, 365 days a year, take out a couple of rainy days. I think there's 4 in Santa Monica.
Right.
And I lived there. I think I experienced it like literally every 3 months you'd have rain. So if you just say 300 days, $10 a day, that's $3,000 per scooter.
That might work.
The scooters cost $400. And if you threw them away every year, every 6 months, you'd still be profitable.
Yeah.
That was why they were able to raise all this money. And they were eating into, this is all inside information, they were eating into, I can say it because I have it from secondhand, but they were eating into the mids, you know, the shorter to mid Uber X rides that cost $7, but you would only pay $2 or $3. So if you were trying to save money, you know, you could save probably 50% or 2/3 taking a bird.
Yep.
Or whatever scooter you chose. So it's definitely a good business. If it's a great business, I'm not sure. But we had the founder of Jump On, and he got bought by Uber.
Oh, right.
And he basically nodded when I said, "You guys, it seems logical you guys would get into scooters." So they're basically, I think Uber is going to buy one of these companies and then have Jump also probably pursuing it, take 2 swings at bat. But I think it'll become a subscription-based service.
Right.
So I think people will pay $20 a month to have unlimited birds or unlimited scooters, put it that way.
Right. So I have a question about the demographic that uses scooters. Do you know about this? Can you tell us roughly who rides scooters?
I don't have the data on that.
Okay.
I mean, anecdotally or visually, it's like it's different. I mean, it's different in San Francisco versus the East Bay.
Got it.
I mean, that's also partially because the demographics of San Francisco and the East Bay are different.
I see old people on them. Like I see 40, 50-somethings on them. Like I see these dorky guys in the financial district with their ties like whipping over their shoulder, you know, and then you see kids on them in Santa Monica. I mean, I think it's everybody. It's just a matter of how ridiculous you look. Like if you're under 40, you probably don't look ridiculous. If you're over 40, you definitely look ridiculous if you're wearing a suit and riding one of these things.
I'm kind of curious just to get a bit serious for a second about what is the economic sort of demographic, because it seems like it's one of the classic companies that started by kind of wealthier, kind of whiter type people with wealthy white problems, you know, of wanting to ride a scooter. Am I just being biased? You know,
I think
you might be being too woke.
You should. Yeah, I mean, if you went to different communities around the Bay Area, there would be different socioeconomic groups of people using scooters.
That's fair. I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Because it's in my, you know, gut instinct, I just see mostly white people.
I think
you're also in Portland. You're also based in Portland.
You're in Portland, which is 99.8%
No,
white.
there's 5.2% black people in Portland. So
I think it's sort of, it reminds me of like the Android argument. People are like, oh, poor people don't have phones. It's like,
and I'm not saying
Android phones are $99. We said it was rich white people.
Right.
So like, it's kind of like that white guilt, like, oh, poor people can't possibly afford this. Or
it's not guilt.
Minorities can't afford this. It's like, are you kidding? It's $2 a ride, Ryan.
Right.
I mean, it's less than taking the bus.
I think, there's also, I had a conversation, I was on a panel a couple months ago with one of the SF Bike Coalition's new organizers. And, you know, they actually do, she was Latina and she grew up in San Francisco. She's a San Francisco native. And so she, you know, was behind a lot of the Bike Coalition's efforts to do outreach and advocacy to
communities. Bike Coalition.
Yeah. Communities of color in San Francisco. They were doing all kinds of things like organizing neighborhood rides from the Tenderloin to the Mission and in the Bayview, just to like make these communities feel more comfortable that bicycling and cycling and road cycling and city cycling could also be for them.
Oh, interesting.
That's interesting. All right. Moving on from that battle. It's going to be a record-breaking year here for IPOs, and the stock market is looking a little bit shaky.
Yeah.
What impact do we think this is going to have on startups? Treehouse, I think you guys are doing 10, 20 million a year in revenue. That's the whisper number.
We're doing great is the answer.
So it's definitely tens of millions.
We're doing great.
And how many full-time employees now, or ballpark?
We're up to 80 now.
80, great. Yeah. So just so you know, Kim, here's how I back into it.
Here's his
about
magic
10K.
watch.
It's about, he's spending about $1 million to $1.5 million a month right now, and I think the company's profitable. That's the whisper, or close to it. So he's probably doing about $15 million in revenue and spending about 15 with 80 people. That would make sense if you do a little spend.
It's like magic.
Subscription businesses are doing great. This is 8 years old now?
8. Yeah, I was reminiscing back to 2011 when I was on the show, and it was in LA.
Yeah. So
Right.
8 years. Yeah.
Because it was founded in 10, it came on 11. Yeah.
So you guys are probably halfway to having that or IPO possibility. Do you even think about that?
No, we just want to build a long-term, sustainable, profitable, good business, right? It's kind of back to basics in a way.
Yeah.
You know, we started Treehouse when there was a madness around ed tech and this belief that, you know, everyone's going to snap their fingers and build billion-dollar ed tech companies. And it turns out it's just not, education is not the type of thing you turn into a billion-dollar business real quick. You're dealing with people, you're dealing with important outcomes. So we love what we do. The team is strong. We're growing really fast. It's a lot of fun, but we haven't raised a dime since 2014. So
does that mean you're purposely going slow, or you don't think there's an opportunity that because right now markets have been hot for that whole 4-year period. Why not raise 20 million, go twice as fast?
I think it's all about long-term. So I meet very few founders who are truly thinking about running their businesses till they die. It really is a rarity. Whether they really believe it, people say that, but actually thinking about it and executing it like that, it's very different.
How do your investors feel about you taking like this steady and slow approach as opposed to race to the finish line?
I have the power is the answer. I was one of those lucky founders who basically was a solo founder. I founded with my wife, but I was the only shareholder and raised a tiny bit of money from, you know, Kevin and Chamath and a few people early when we didn't need it. We were profitable already. So we just raised after we were profitable. Didn't raise much. You know, I still own the majority of the company. My wife and I do. So the answer is, I say to my investors, you know, I believe in building a long-term, sustainable, profitable business that is beneficial to the world. And, you know, I'd like you to be on board with that. And thankfully.
How do you think about that, Kim? Because you're now a venture capitalist and you have a 10-year window with that fund, and you got to get things wrapped up in some reasonable amount of time. How would you feel if you were the investor in Treehouse and there were 8 years and you had a founder who's like, I don't care about an exit or raising money and going faster? Well, how would you, let's do the interaction right here. How would you push him without, you know, being too pushy? Or how would you think about a founder who doesn't want to have an exit?
All I would say is we're a very founder-friendly firm, and we are a firm that's started by, you know, founders themselves, like Alexis of Reddit and Gary, who came from YC. So yeah.
Probably would say, okay, do the right thing. I mean, part of this is founded on the belief that if you are trying to build something long term that is truly valuable to both the world and its shareholders, if you can do it, it's truly better, right, than optimizing for a moment in time.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's what we're thinking about.
All right. When we get back, I'll tell you exactly how I would handle Ryan building a lifestyle giant business and then not exiting and getting me a return on capital if I was his investor when we get back. Speaking of investors and speaking about cap tables, everybody knows that Silicon Valley wealth comes from equity, not salary. I mean, people are well paid, but if you want to hit the home run, it's going to come from equity. And that data is tracked on something called a cap table. But cap tables, we all know, are broken. Many of them are wrong. I would say maybe 1 out of 3 times I review a cap table with our attorneys, we have a different view of that cap table than other people. And people use spreadsheets and paper certificates and all this nonsense. It leads to massive amounts of inaccuracy. But Carta fixes cap tables and equity management. Over 10,000 companies and VC firms, people like Slack, Coinbase, Flexport, August Capital, and myself at launch, manage hundreds of billions of dollars in equity on Carta. As an investor, we are always glad to see our companies using Carta because we can request a cap table and the closing documents directly through the platform, and it creates great transparency, and the year-end audit for us runs much smoother. We save about an hour a company if they're using Carta. It forces founders also to become organized and really understand this important information. There's no risk of losing paper stock certificates. So here is your call to action. Go ahead and get Carta by going to carta.com/twist, and they will give you their great cap table software plus a free 409A valuation. If you don't know what a 409A valuation is, you haven't started your company yet and had to deal with this. So go ahead and visit carta.com/twist. We use it. We love it. It's awesome. Carta.com/twist. I promised I would say,
Let's hear it.
this is how I would deal with it.
Go.
Okay, we're in year 9.
Yeah.
Let's fast forward to year 10.
Just
Okay.
building a great business, just moving forward.
Ryan, it has been amazing to watch you build this business.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that.
Our fund that you're in is wrapping up. We're 10 years here, and we need to get some liquidity for our investors. We gave you that money, not as a donation, but to obviously return money to our investors. We'd like to open up a discussion about selling our shares to you or to another investor so that we can bank a win. How do you feel about that?
100% open to that.
Great. Do you have $10 million to buy our...
I do.
Great.
Here you go.
Okay. And now we're
That
done.
was easy.
But that's what's going to happen in 2 years if you don't have an exit, right?
I mean, that's not hard. I mean, I've done secondary before, and it's just a sales process. It's almost a good opportunity to swap out investors that do deserve a return.
Yep.
And to find somebody that can come in and be additive to the board. So I think if that's done professionally, it could be additive for everybody.
So your position is you never want to sell this?
No.
Wow.
I say every day, I would like to die running Treehouse. And if I die before then, I'll probably crawl to the grave and keep going. I mean, I'm extremely passionate about what we do.
Yeah.
It's kind of off the charts. It's like my religion.
Yeah.
But I think that's ultimately what it takes to run a truly great company, because it's. I mean, you have so many founders on the show. You've dealt with so many founders. You know about this. I mean, it's the hardest possible thing you can.
You still subscribe to this like Fridays off, and it doesn't have to be crazy at work?
No, it all ended.
That all ended.
Yep.
It's crazy at work.
I have a little story real
ahead.
quick if you want to hear it. So
Because you were the original No Fridays.
so we had a 4-day work week. We didn't have managers. All of this craziness was going on.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, it was January 4th of 2017. We were going through an acquisition potential talk.
People wanted to buy you, or you were buying somebody? People
Yeah,
wanted to buy
someone
you.
was trying to buy us. And ultimately, I decided it wasn't the right strategic thing for us. It just wasn't a good fit. Financially, it wouldn't have been as good of a return as it should have been for the shareholders. So I was texting the founder. I said, I don't think this is going to work. Appreciate you going through this process, but it's not going to happen. And he said, are we breaking up over text?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we are.
Yep.
So he said, well, let's have a phone call. And I said, fine, let's talk in the morning. And woke up at 5, hopped in the phone and said, it's not going to work. I'm really sorry. And he said, are you sure? This is like a 1 + 1 = 10. Come on, let's do this,
Yeah.
And he was supposed to be the salesy CEO. I was the product guy.
Yeah.
So I thought this makes sense, maybe not. And finally said no. And he went quiet. And he said, I was like, hello? And he said, we're going to crush you. You know that, right?
Ooh.
And I said,
Oofa.
I just I didn't expect him to say that. So I just kind of went quiet and I thought, that's interesting. Wow, I'm glad I didn't say yes. And so said, well, I wish you the best, and take care. And I turned into a different person.
Wow.
It was like, I
You poked the tiger?
Yeah, I decided at that moment, I cared so much about our mission that I would not let anybody kill us. And so at that moment, I was like, I'm going to wake up 4:30 every day from now on. We're going to have to work super hard, and I'm going to have to learn how to be a salesman. And it changed everything.
So now it's crazy at work. You're scaling. You got your competitive juices flowing.
It's good. It's the way it should be at work. Right.
All right. Facebook is a complete, utter disaster right now. It reminds me like what this year is like the Uber year. It seems like when a company goes through their hard time, every single thing comes out.
Yeah.
And Facebook, obviously, there's been massive internal tensions.
Oh, boy.
And UK Parliament seized a bunch of Facebook documents. I know those documents because I'm in some of them, where they were talking about punishing rivals and reacting to people in the press. But as part of this whole thing, Facebook is failing their black employees and its black users. A former Facebook employee, Mark Lucky, says he released an internal memo prior to his last day with the company stating that Facebook is failing to properly represent Facebook employees and users of color. they actually turned off the post for community guidelines. That was
so bad.
That was pretty bad.
I know.
And
it's hard to believe.
What are your thoughts on this, Ryan? You're pretty up to date on it.
I brought this up because on some respects, I can completely relate to white CEOs who are getting this wrong. So the reason why I'm so passionate about this right now is because 2 years ago, I signed a diversity pledge at Treehouse. I was like, I believe in diversity and inclusion. I'm not racist. And then I turned around and looked at Treehouse, and it was basically a bunch of white guys. And I thought, something's really wrong.
Yeah.
And we talked about this on the show last time I was on, and just realized that's on me. Like something that's on me as a CEO. No one else is responsible.
Yeah.
So went about basically a year-long journey of, learning about my white privilege, my male privilege, just stuff that massively affected us. And what I realized, I'm not a racist, but I benefited from racism. So now what? And we went about basically trying to fix Treehouse. And it was pretty simple, actually. It required me truly caring as a CEO. That was like step one.
Making it a priority.
Yeah, like this actually matters.
Okay.
We're going to make it a value in the company, and then we're going to actually measure managers accordingly. And then we worked real hard on it for a while, and we partnered with the Boys and Girls Clubs to actually invest in them. We gave scholarships to our own curriculum. Then we hired apprentices, and it was a lot of work, but it was good. And ultimately it worked. And so
Define worked.
We basically are massively changing the percentage of people of color and women at Treehouse, like fundamentally. So my conclusion, the reason why I thought this was so fascinating is, Facebook, it's just getting beat up again and again and again about this. And the only conclusion I can draw is at companies like Google and Facebook, where the engineer is considered God. Like the culture is like circle.
Yeah, it's the most important position in those companies.
It's it. And then so computer science becomes the gate. So you build a culture where the only way to become a god at the company is to be attached to computer science.
And then you have the pipeline issue because people graduating with PhDs in computer science maybe match a certain demographic.
I'd be careful about the pipeline rationale. I mean, like,
is it just the word pipeline that's triggering, or is it?
No, it's not. It's not. This is not not a conversation about triggering. This is the concern would be that if you take that as a rationale, you're absolving yourself of your own responsibility to an active participant.
But is there a pipeline issue? There is actually a pipeline issue.
No, so there's not. So like what we've learned is all that you have to change is the computer science requirement. So that's not lowering the bar. What you're saying is there's actually a better way to get talent that's actually more indicative of potential, success. All of this, and me as a white male saying the only way I know how to signal quality talent is by looking for white computer science graduates coming from Stanford, and so my only conclusion is like Mark must not ultimately care. There's like a deep part of this that means that
it's not a priority for him.
Not a priority. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say he might care, but it's not a priority.
Well, they're the same thing.
Is it? I don't know. I'm trying to think that through.
You can't disconnect the two.
It's the same thing.
It's the same.
People could care about something and not make it a priority, I think.
You're ultimately saying, I don't care.
Like you could care about the environment, still ride a private jet. Would you say the person cares or not?
Yeah. So this is sad. I keep saying this. This is literally the CEO's fault. I mean, it's...
Yeah. What do you think, Kim? Let's talk about this pipeline thing.
Sure. I mean, I if I am remembering correctly, and I could be wrong, I remember Jessica Gwynn writing a story for USA Today looking at graduates in CS from American universities. And I wanted to say that the number overall was something like 4%, but the number showing up at these companies was like 2%. So already like, if you were really matching, you would at least keep the same level.
Right.
If you're throwing off
not even hitting
people.
The dropout rate for people of color in computer science is 80 to 90%.
Yeah, the Mitch and Freda Kapoor run a program that I spoke at in Berkeley where they just prepare people of color who are going into college to not drop out, to make sure they have the underlying coursework to lower the dropout rate because of that statistic.
Yeah, everybody just needs to understand that there's this thing called equity. And this is the deep thing I learned, is that I used to think America was an equal playing field. You're kind of raised like, like work hard.
Yeah.
And it turns out that a great analogy is that the starting line analogy where you're on a racetrack,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so if you're white, cis, male, you kind of like start like 3 laps ahead. And if you're a black woman, especially if you're LGBTQ, you start like -3 laps. And so the problem is no one's starting at the same point.
Right.
So
So the person who's running, who's a white cis male, could feel like they're running really hard.
yeah, I'm working hard.
I'm working hard, but they got
just
to start.
They started like a minute
Ahead.
before
Yeah.
everybody else, right?
I kind of relate to that because I used to get in a little trouble on Twitter. I was like, listen, America's an imperfect meritocracy. Obviously, it's imperfect, but it's still the best meritocracy I know.
Sadly, it's not.
It's not a
That's the rough
meritocracy.
thing.
Meritocracy is a word that was, popularized in I want to say 1950s or 1960s era novel that was written by a British author, and it was written in a totally satirical sense. And then people took that word from that book and started using it.
Well, let me ask you this way,
literally.
Kim. Can a person, if they have the motivation from anywhere in America, learn skills online with Treehouse and become a developer? Or do you believe that they can't?
This assumes a number of things. Do
Yeah,
they have
yes and no?
Do they have income and time to do that? Like are they making minimum wage where they have to work like I don't know,
Treehouse is
however many
$20 a
hours?
month.
Yeah. No, but like it's also
the
the time
issue.
too.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
the rent in their city. Do they have obligation? Like a lot of
Average American watches 4 hours of TV
a lot of folks that I've met, one issue that I've when I've talked to people of color who work in the tech industry and have casual conversations with them about their backgrounds, they're doing all kinds of other, like a lot of them are doing all kinds of other things. Like, their parents' house was foreclosed on in the last economic crisis, which disproportionately affected African-American homeowners. And they're not only working for one of these big tech companies, they're also paying for their parents and their families' livelihoods, and they've got student debt, and and that's just a whole bunch of other things.
Going backwards,
Yeah.
isn't it?
And so you're tacking that onto like, do they have time? Can they go online? Yeah, of course they can go online. And then there's also an issue of role models and motivation and feel like
that's the dangerous
like
third rail for us
entrepreneurship
to even talk about.
Yeah,
is
their
motivation.
entrepreneurship is like there's a I think there's we should find the study, but there's like a knitting circle study of that like I want to say Tyler Cowen put on his blog. Like he linked to it on his blog a month or two ago, and was talking about like whether people started to feel the motivation to go into starting their own small businesses, and it was a really kind of like a social cue thing where people are around each other, they're seeing other people like them
modeling.
become successful, and then they feel like this is a possibility for them as well.
Humans are modeling machines. I mean, that's what kids do, and even
You can't
adults
do it
model
unless
each
you
other.
can see someone like you doing it. I mean, it's easier for you and I when we were young to look at Steve Jobs or Larry Ellison and say, oh, like
Bill Gates.
White guys can do it. All I'll say is I've seen success with an alternative model, and it's powerful, which is apprenticeship. If you truly consider a new model, it's actually
Define what that means in your context.
Sure.
What do you mean by
So,
apprenticeship?
What it means is a company says, we want to hire great talent. We're going to allocate 10 headcount to apprentices. So let me talk about what that means. So they say, okay, what we're going to do is actually invest in our local community. So right now, the Boys and Girls Clubs or Dress for Success, there's people live here. Let's invest in them. And this is where it comes to, okay, we got to make sure they have access to laptops and broadband. We have to provide mentorship and support. We have to do a lot of wraparound services because there are historical barriers, right? And then they learn, and then they come on board as apprentices. And apprentices mean most companies have software engineer 1 or design level 1. What we basically do is say your company needs to create a new pay grade called SE0, software engineer 0, or design 0, and then we map literally the requirements to go from SE0 to SE1. And once you
you pay people to come to the apprenticeship, or the apprenticeship pays the company?
It's paid.
Which way?
So you pay your apprentices.
Got it. Isn't the way apprenticeships work, they either worked for free or they paid?
That's sort of internship, whereas apprenticeship is very different. The idea is there's a real job at the end of this.
Because internships, you're not allowed to give the intern, according to law.
Right.
My understanding is you can't give them work that would actually be work that people would do for pay, which makes it insane.
Right. This is why carpenters and electricians and florists have been doing apprenticeship for millennia. Like, why aren't we doing this in tech? It's such a better
the
model.
reason is obvious, isn't it?
Well, because people have a perception.
The reason is because if you take your great developer and you say, teach this person how to develop, they can't be developing 50 hours a week.
Yeah, this is
and
also
then
a
you're going to
fallacy.
get run over by your competitors.
So this is the funny
That's how Zuckerberg thinks, for sure.
Well, but the problem is it's like tech debt. So it's if you assume that your best engineers are actually operationally effective 100% of the time, you're actually not a good manager. You don't understand that people are dealing with all sorts of things. So what you're saying is mentoring is actually, you should think about it like tech debt. It's actually part of building a sustainable long-term product that's good. So passing down your time to a mentee is actually good business. And actually at Treehouse, we've said, who wants to mentor? And every single engineer held up their hands because people want to give back.
I could totally see that. Kim, why do you think these things don't exist in the...
I would, well, I wanted to bring up a different point, which is
Sure.
I think look at the representation issue and the larger issues that Facebook is, dealing with as a political entity are interrelated. And I think that, if your employee base, I'm not just talking about diversity and representation in a purely American sense. I'm also talking about it in an international sense.
Yeah.
Which is like, if you have more people in the company who have kind of a lived experience where institutions and power has been tilted or balanced against them in potentially like a harmful or like if you have more employees with an understanding of how power can be used malevolently, like you'll have people with more of a mindset who can understand how the tools and the products that they're building at scale can
you're
also
talking
be
about
abused. And
authoritarian regimes and, people who control the press in their countries and
potentially, or even in if we want to bring it back to the domestic American experience, like a lot of African American millennials, like they have grandparents who have stories of what it was like to live in the Jim Crow South.
Yeah.
They have family members who have stories of what it was like to, know people, know family members who were lynched or attacked or run out of town. Like you can talk to anyone. Like people have their grandparent stories.
Yeah.
And so there is, and that legacy and that history is passed down and that memory is passed down within them. So they know how institutions can be abused.
It all goes back to the person in charge. Zuckerberg has no social adeptness, I think, and I think he has no moral compass except for growth. And you just put someone like that with unchecked power, and then you have Sheryl Sandberg there, who's an operational machine, making this incredibly operationally perfect ad network with somebody who is just doesn't care where the chips fall in terms of building a social network and wants to take all friction out. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, so this is a form, it's not like technical debt in an engineering sense, but it is a type of institutional debt where over time, that lack of awareness has caught up with Facebook, the company itself. And, for other companies that operate in the real physical world, like an Uber or Lyft or whatever, that's going to happen much sooner because it's like you're moving physical pieces and bits and atoms around. Whereas, in a social networking sense, like there's an assumption that the company could operate under like the kinds of software margins that it has over the last decade. And now we're seeing some of the negative externalities of that.
What do you think is going to happen? They're not going to be allowed to buy the next Instagram or WhatsApp. That I think is off the table. I think the government's going to be like, no, you've got enough power.
It depends on who controls the FTC and which commissioners are appointed to it. So you have to look at the breakup of who's...
Well, the right hates them because they deplatform everybody. Mm-hmm. And the left hates them because they let the Russians collude to put them in. So I think they're equally hated by the Bernie Sanders and the right, aren't they?
Yeah, but you have to see how people actually vote. There are a number of merger discussions that are happening like this or last year. It depends who's on the commission and who gets appointed. So you'd have to keep up pressure on whoever is the next...
I just think that whoever it is, even left or right, they both equally hate the impact Facebook has had. I think they're equally there's equal disdain for them.
Right. I think we all understand now how much power Facebook has, and I don't think we all understood before. I think it's...
Have you curtailed your Facebook usage or lowered it?
Yeah, I do not use Facebook hardly at all anymore. It's strange.
How about you, Kim?
I'm an active Instagram user, so that's a product.
Me too.
Yeah.
So we're on Facebook, I guess, right?
Yeah.
I've been trying to deprecate my usage because I just hate them. And I had turned off my account for a couple of years, and it's just incredibly hard because we have our advertising.
Right.
It's utility. And then I have logins. So I'm not using Facebook Connect anymore. And I've been like turning off all my posts. I got like a little Google Chrome extension that turns off all your likes, so I've been like going through my entire history and turning everything off. And I deleted all my tweets over 1,000. I have like the last 1,000 tweets only. But I backed them all up. I was like, you know what? Enough. I don't want to get caught up in this, like me debating like Islam and terrorism from 8 years ago, you know, and or like
that's interesting.
This issue of like pipeline issues or whatever. Like, you know, we would have vibrant discussions on these communities. And now it's like, oh, well, let me take one text that Kim did, you know, out of context where she made a joke about, you know, some person in Palo Alto who got up to a lectern and, you know, was goofy. And that's like your whole definition of your career is going to be that one tweet.
But so let's separate that out. So you're saying, well, I don't really want this past stuff out there, which is fine. But are you also saying I'm not going to use these platforms in the future? Like I want to stop.
I am lowering it. I'm using it more strategically.
Because I feel like the problem is the growth for your marketing strategy is on these platforms. I mean, you literally must use them.
I use them to just take clips from this show and put it out there. You know why? Because if people hear my voice, like we had just a hard discussion about race and gender and whatever and pipeline. If I were to write the word pipeline in a tweet, people are like, oh my God.
It's not, oh my God.
Saying pipeline.
It's not, oh my God. It's like.
I roll.
It's a thing that we should, you know, it's a thing that we should probably
But what do you think about this? Like it is, you know, it's clear Facebook has extreme power, but yet your portfolio companies, you, me, my company, I'm going to use Facebook, their ad platform, Instagram's platform to grow my company. Am I being hypocritical or like, is there a choice now?
I mean, I think this is one of the questions that sort of intersects with questions of antitrust and monopoly power. And, you know, at that point when it has that level of gravity and force, what is it? How should it be managed? How should it be looked at? How should it be?
And here's an even bigger one. Do we want to own the largest companies in the world? Do we want China to own them?
I think that's a red herring of a debate. Yeah. I mean, I think that, I think that's an excuse that a lot of these companies use just not to have like the level of domestic or European, like both American or European scrutiny that they probably should have.
Well, Europe's pretty scrutinous of the companies now with the fines they've been given. But if you just think about it, imagine you're the SEC and you ban Elon Musk, or you stop another company and then they don't grow as fast, or you cap the number of Lyfts or Ubers in a city. It's like, okay, well now these companies can employ less people, generate less tax.
But who's saying that Facebook, itself isn't de facto effectively banning the existence of lots of other potentially innovative companies?
It's possible. It's just a harder argument to make when you've got one giant company over here with 100,000 employees and you're like, let's take this American success story and let's kneecap them. It's just it's politically hard.
I think on a PR basis. I would also see the counter example if you look at like in the Chinese market. I mean, the Chinese government is also exercising a lot more kind of interference or regulatory control of domestic companies there. Like there's an increasing usage
they pick the winners, literally.
Domestic cells or party cells within companies. That's grown significantly over the last 1 to 2 years, where you actually have a political cell of party operatives within the company involved in management level decisions. Wow. And that didn't used to be used. Like that went out of favor for a while, but now it's back.
China's a rigged market. It's kind of hard to understand exactly how anything works over there. That's pretty opaque, from accounting to government to who gets to win.
Did you read the books AI Superpowers?
No, but I played poker with Kai-Fu last week.
I'm about halfway through it, and it was fascinating to me. I didn't understand how entrepreneurship kind of worked in China, and it was fascinating to me. It kind of made me feel like the U.S. versus China thing, like you said, is a red herring. It feels like there's a lot of nuance there. Yeah. I'm very fascinated. I haven't finished it yet, but it seems like a great book.
The nuance about which part or about, there's just a lot
of it. Nuance.
There's a lot of it.
It's all nuance.
Well, it's not, entrepreneurship isn't even the same from what I can deduct in China versus here. It's just, read it. It's interesting.
It's very interesting that those companies don't have any presence in America.
They have presence. I mean, Tencent has WeChat. WeChat has like a very active user base among the diaspora all over the world.
Right.
How many WeChat users are in America? 10 million? 20 million?
I don't know.
But
It's going to be like low.
the book talks about how, I think it was Yahoo went over, installed basically, I think it was Yahoo, went over and basically installed American Way over there, and it utterly failed.
Oh yeah, that's why they wound up with their big position in Baidu.
Right. And so
Or Alibaba.
Alibaba.
This is very different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, you're not allowed to operate over there. I mean, that's one of the big things.
right.
But it's interesting how there isn't a cultural phenomenon here or there from America, except for maybe movies going from America there.
The work ethic that I read about in the book scared me. It was
It's
Yep.
positively
996.
996. It's
Holy-
positively
996.
the 80s and 90s here.
Yeah.
I just
By the way, 996 was pretty much the 90s. What are you talking about?
right.
It's only these millennials who
I
realize
think you
it's
should explain what that is for your viewers.
9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week,
Yeah.
which is exactly what we did in the 90s and into the 2000s.
Sounds very
It's
hard.
only this recent generation that's like, it doesn't have to be crazy at work and you should have life-work balance. It's just like
I think I
social
found the middle- I
media
found the middle part. It's
like,
not a 4-day week. And I
makes
found
it
a
like super
996.
easy for people to be critical of people who choose to be on a mission and work whatever hours.
Yeah.
And that those people have no agency and can't leave those companies if they demand those hours.
Right.
You disagree with me, Kim?
I think that our firm, particularly like Alexis, has been a big proponent of taking something down called what he calls like hustle porn.
Yeah. Super convenient since he
Oh,
already
interesting.
made a ton of
Really?
money and he's hustled. I knew him in the early days. That kid was working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. Alexis is a complete hypocrite. He was hustling. Now he's married to Serena Williams, who's got $100 million. He's made tens of millions already off of his investments and Reddit. I mean, come on. It's very convenient for Alexis to
Maybe
be
he
like,
has
now
clarity
hustle
now.
porn. Of course he does. All of us do when we're rich. If you get rich and you're 40 or 50 and you got the money already, you're like, oh, hustling is bullshit.
Right.
Come on.
And I would say,
That kid hustled like you wouldn't
for,
believe.
I mean, at least one thing that we notice, like with second-time founders versus first-time founders,
Right.
they're just so much smarter and more efficient with
Yes.
how they, put their
That's
time
true.
together. And they also know what to freak out about and what not to freak
Right.
out about
Yes.
in a very different way instead of freaking out about everything.
Yeah,
Right.
that's true.
Yeah.
I'm busting his chops, but I do see this trend. It's basically they're all attacking Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like,
I get attacked a lot. I wake up at 4:30 every day now, and you would not believe how
why?
many people.
Because you're woke on social media?
No, because I realize I need to work harder. I was the
Wait, no,
4-day
people are
work week
attacking
guy.
you? Oh,
Yeah,
I
they're-
see, because of that.
They're
You
like,
changed
you
your
need
mind.
to sleep. I'm like, yes, but
See, I'm all about agency. Like, can't people just pick and be okay with the fact that some people want to have like a lifestyle and then other people,
yeah.
like if you were a musician and you played 12 hours a day or an Olympian, nobody would ever criticize you. But if you're an entrepreneur, you work at an entrepreneurial company, it's like you're now getting
I think
criticized.
his comment was more about like that hustle porn, like the porn part of it, where you're doing it to kind of socially signal
Yeah,
when it's not actually
that's
true, and then
nonsense.
you're hiding your own
I agree
kind
with
of
that
sense
then.
of vulnerability or your own. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, no. If you're just like, it's 3 a.m. and I'm taking a selfie of myself, like still grinding.
And on Adderall, no.
Yeah. Well, that actually is really dangerous because that does not go anywhere. No,
Don't do this at home, kids.
literally, I know people who've tried to do the performance enhancing thing. It was like a big thing at like one of the accelerators, and like
Not
it's
good.
like
that's
guys,
not going to lead
it's-
to a good place.
It's not going to lead you where you want to go. Like, get sleep.
Yeah, but if you find something you're truly passionate about and you want to work hard on it and you think it's going to make a difference,
Yep.
great.
Let's talk about, since we're here on This Week in Disasters, let's talk about the disaster that is housing. It continues here, the housing crisis. We were supposed to have either approved or in the process of approving, when you and I started talking online, Kim, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, 50,000 units were supposed to be in some process.
So in San Francisco, there is a pipeline of 50,000 units. Most of those are in very long-term projects like Treasure Island and Hunters Point, which now has, I don't know what kind of nuclear waste on it.
Yeah. Oops.
The shipyard or potentially, we don't know, but the testing was.
So these are like planned communities kind of situations.
These are large-scale developments that take decades to do. And then there's a lot of kind of mid-size and smaller projects in there. But I would say so 2012, all right, so we had the bottom of the cycle, 2008, 2009. Then the market really started to take off in the Bay Area around 2012. And then everything was very heated from 2012 to maybe like 2017 or so.
Correct.
And there was a lot of production. By a lot, I mean like 4,000 units a year or 3,000 units a year instead of 2,000 units a year in 2014, 2015, and 2016. And then it topped out through a combination of factors. Construction costs are a significant part of that. I mean, the construction industry, there was a lot of labor that kind of cycled out in the last recession and was not replaced by a younger generation of workers. So there's massive construction shortages all over the state. And obviously, not only was it there to begin with, the fires aggravated that.
All right.
Yeah.
We lost hundreds of thousands of homes in the fires.
Yeah, tens of thousands of homes.
Tens of
and then,
thousands of
yeah.
homes.
And
Can you describe at a macro level the problem, what's happening for the listeners who don't understand? Like, why is housing a problem?
yeah, in California or in the Bay Area, the median home is maybe 10, 11x the median income. It's pretty
10 or 11x.
Yeah. So it's very expensive, very unaffordable. Lots of folks. Obviously, that affects a huge swath, if not the majority, of workers in the Bay Area. And there are there's a couple things going on here. One is that, California, it's the mythology around the West Coast, the mythology around, states like California, Oregon, Washington, or, West Coast states where people, pioneers and whatever, came to the frontier, built their stuff. And when we suburbanized a lot of the West Coast in the 1950s and 60s, that was sort of an echo of that mythology. People came out here for cheap housing, sunshine, whatever. And then a lot of the coastal land was built out. Coastal flatland that's easy to build on was built out by the 1970s or so here. And then after that, communities started to downzone their neighborhoods actively in the 1970s.
What does that mean?
Downzone meaning like restrict the zoning. So like before you could kind of build whatever, and then
Height-wise.
Height-wise, density-wise. And then in the 1970s, a lot people started to say single-family homes only
which
here.
Which benefits wealthier people.
Which benefits people who already owned there.
There were non-development, basically. Like if you look at Brentwood, Santa Monica, or here, Atherton, Palo Alto, whether it's LA or here, they basically just were like, no more construction.
So you need higher density, right?
Yeah, but but that's banned. That's illegal, right?
That's insane.
So it became illegal in the 70s. And then on top of that, housing prices started to go out of control in the 70s, and then California voters reacted again, passed Prop 13, which capped property taxes. You have your own version in Oregon called Measure 5, passed in the early 90s.
This is critically important. So whenever you buy your house in California, you pay that tax forever.
Around that tax, no more than 2%. And then your kids can also inherit it.
No way.
So there are people in San Francisco right now who live in Victorian, so that costs $5 million. But they bought them for $100,000, so they're literally paying $2,000 a year in tax on what should be $50,000 a year in tax.
That's insane. Is
that right, Kim?
Directionally? I mean, if it was reassessed at a contemporary rate,
Why do people want to downzone? What is?
This buys into a certain cultural aesthetic, this certain mythology of like you own your own piece of land, you have a yard, you have a backyard, you have you have your own house, you have your car, you have your privacy.
And let's be honest. Housing prices. So where I live in Hillsborough, when they showed me the map along El Camino Real, there was like this jagged edge. And I asked the realtor, like, what's that? Like, oh, those are the, I was like, what? They're like, those are the apartments. I'm like, oh. So they literally drew the map, it seems, around the apartment building. So Hillsborough and Palo Alto are only single family homes, I believe.
Yeah. Right.
No multifamily.
So the other thing I would add, that ties back to our earlier conversation about race is it's very interesting that, from the 1940s through the 1960s or so, African Americans could not really buy homes in white neighborhoods for a lot of reasons because, the private real estate industry backed up by federal lending policy,
would exclude them.
Would exclude them or steer them or say like, well, if an African-American family moves to your neighborhood, your property values are going to drop.
Right.
And so by the time the civil rights movement happened and by the time we changed the law to ban these type of practices in the Fair Housing Act in 1968, which was passed a week after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, it's funny, interesting, worth noting that a lot of the downzoning started happening in the years after that.
Yep.
Once explicit practices were banned. And so like these things have accumulated over 40 years. And it's just kind of been this massive housing deficit over the last 40 years. And it also like affects the way that cities plan, because, if you have residential houses that pay this tax rate or the flat cap tax rate over many decades, you're not actually making sufficient tax revenue for them to cover for the cost of police, schools, and fires. So you'll see is cities make choices in order to shore up their own balance sheets, so to speak, to build office space, approve office space, because office pays taxes without costing as much in services. And then that aggravates this housing imbalance. And so like San Jose, for example, sold a parcel of land near Diridon Station last week or 2 weeks ago for about just over 100 million to Google.
Yep.
And the plan, is to bring 20,000 workers there. And there'll be some housing, but obviously not enough housing for that many workers.
Wow.
And that will help San Jose's long-term fiscal sustainability, because now it will have more office space to pay the tax revenue for everything else. But it creates a situation where it's like, oh, well, here's another giant tech campus, another one,
and no housing,
and then like some housing, but not really enough to cover the amount of housing need that is represented by that campus. And so like all of these cities are doing that.
And then to get voted into office, you have to pander to a certain demographic that votes.
Or just not freak them out,
Or not freak them out that you're going to change their taxes. So my understanding is...
Not change their neighborhood.
Not change your neighborhood, but also this idea of changing your... Nobody wants to touch the taxation of homes and make them pay taxation that's more
I don't think anybody
commensurate with the value of the home.
I don't think people are really talking about that. What people are talking about is in 2020, there will be a ballot measure to do something called split roll, which will... So this law also covered office. So Disneyland pays Disneyland's tax from decades ago. The Brentwood Golf Course pays, like the Beverly Hills Golf Course pays the tax rate from decades ago.
Like literally it's like a value of like 100,000.
It's just totally illogical.
Yeah. And so there will be a ballot measure 2 years from now to amend the commercial part of that tax. And that will generate about, anywhere from $9 to $11 billion primarily for the school system in California.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm getting up to speed on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
And this is, I hate to keep banging on about this, but this is why I keep going back to apprenticeship. If people have access to the high paying jobs, they can begin to get access to the system.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can never get the job, you can never get access, you never get in. Right. And then you get another tech center campus thing and you can't buy a house.
Well, and then everybody got duped into thinking that college was going to be this way to get those high-powered jobs.
I know.
And they went 100, 200,000 in debt.
Right.
There's another relationship there between Prop 13 and college, because the University of California and CSU system, those used to be tuition free.
Yeah.
And actually, if you go back to when this law was passed, like Jerry Brown, who's also governor in 1970s in California, he's governor now. Yeah. He's just been governor. He's governor twice.
In perpetuity.
Yeah, forever governor. I mean, until Gavin got sworn in. He was like, if you guys pass this, we might have to start charging tuition to the university system. And he warned everyone, literally.
Yep.
And people still voted in, and you know what? That decimated the education system in California.
It's really a short-term thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, we've got to figure this out. I got the domain name.
Good. Figureout.com.
MaryJason.com. Kim is going to be like my secret consultant. I have her on the program just so
you.
No, all I have to do is read her tweets. It's very helpful. Trust me. I have my position papers, or like I'm just cribbing all those great tweets.
But yeah, the other addition on top of that is now like, wow, this climate change wildfire thing. Holy moly. I mean, fire's definitely been part of the history of California forever, but like what we've seen in the last 2 years, unbelievable.
Right.
It's pretty crazy because if you think about Malibu, and I lived in Santa Monica for a while, and you start looking at the wildfires going on there. These are like the most expensive real estate, and you have all the oceanfront real estate is now, because of rising sea levels, all those $10, $20 million houses, now it's going to be hard to sell those.
I know.
It's going to be hard to buy or sell a home anywhere in Malibu because you're in a fire thing. And I've been looking for systems to keep houses from going on fire. And it was interesting. I started doing all this research, and Trump made this seemingly ridiculous statement of like they rake up in Norway. I think they're raking, or Finland, like they're raking things up, and that helps. So I go online and I'm like go down the rabbit hole until like 3 a.m. trying to think of startup ideas around it. Every video on YouTube by firefighters about wildfires is about raking up leaves and underbrush and getting them away from houses. So like in that case, Trump's 100% correct in that.
Well,
one of the ways to
the
keep
the homes are the fuel. So like the trees in California are evolved to withstand fire.
Right.
They're evolved to withstand fire, or the non-native trees are actually evolved to spread fire.
Except when all the pine needles are up against a home. So I watched all these videos from the 80s and 90s, and they're like, here's how you stop the fire from spreading.
Right.
You rake up all the stuff, and you make sure none of it is leaning against the home. And then you put rocks along the edge of your home. And
I would also stress like
and rooftops.
In a firestorm, it doesn't matter.
Depends.
Raking might not help.
Well, I mean, listen, you have two things going on. Like one, is there a way to mitigate it? And then two, like on a day-to-day basis, and there's like, oh, what is our big plan here? Because
so I mean, obviously you want to manage vegetation.
Yeah.
If you have trees that are very close to your property, take care of them.
Not a good idea.
But then on the other hand, like a firestorm is significant. Like the tunnel fire, the 1991 tunnel fire in the Bay Area, that was like a home every 11 to 13 seconds would go up on fire. It's very fast.
Well, and there's wind.
Has to do with the Diablo winds and the Santa Ana winds.
Yeah, the winds are just crazy once they get going. We have 2 investments in the housing space. I think housing is like the real like opportunity. Education, housing/construction, and healthcare are the hardest, most intractable, seemingly people are the most pessimistic about, and those are the ones I'm looking for as an investor.
Powerful.
If you think about it, like
that's what I say. I have such a long-term view. I mean, if you can truly think long-term education or any of those.
No, the 2 that we're doing, Blockable is making like houses in factories and then dropping them in places, and we're doing them for low income, homeless, and fires and all that kind of stuff. And then Any Place is taking all the 2.5-star hotels that are getting murdered.
Right.
2- and 3-star hotels are getting murdered by Airbnb.
Right.
And they're turning them into 3 to 6 month housing options like for millennials. So you can live in a hotel in Any Place. So check out Any Place if you want to live in a hotel. All right, let's talk a little bit about education as we wrap up here. What do we want to talk about? Education or Google Dragonfly, Google China.
Talk about education.
I'm a little passionate about education, so I would lean that way.
All right. U.S. is spending more on education than any other countries, and we're falling massively behind. Go.
But this is
what should we do? You're the God King.
Well, this is a logical outcome of what we've built in America. So the university system really began to turn into what it is when veterans came back from World War II and they received funding to get a college degree. And so what happened is everybody started going to college, and which is a great thing because back then it was a good investment. And now you have everybody having a degree, but actually what's since happened is every job is turned into a trade job. So look at all of us in this room. Are any of us trained at university to do this? Is there any real connection between?
Absolutely. My master's was in podcasting.
Right. Exactly. It was a great investment.
Podcasting from Fordham University in the 1990s.
All of us are doing highly advanced trade skills.
Yeah.
And yet we're training people in a system that absolutely does not, optimize for that. So it's clearly broken.
What's the end game for universities?
Most of them are going to go out of business.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, of course.
Are millennials just opting out of like going $200,000 in debt? Are they just going to be like, no?
So we're seeing by far people pick schools where there's a job at the end. I mean, this is what the good boot camps figured out. Mm-hmm. People are going to opt for a fun boot camp that's still in person, that has a real job and gets you into tech. That makes 100% sense.
And those cost like 10, 15 grand.
Yeah, 15 grand.
Totally
great.
Worth it.
And there's a couple good boot camps out there. So great, go to those. And then the rest of us are fighting each other tooth and nail for graduates from Stanford. When the truth is there's actually talent right in our neighborhood that could be taught a skill for a fraction of the cost and stay longer. I mean, the education system, the higher education system is completely broken. And I predict in 10 years, all of the mid-tier state schools, like the one I went to, Colorado State, will be gone. And gone. And you'll have the high...
because no one's attending it, or because the state's not sufficiently funding it, or what?
Mostly because people aren't attending.
Yeah.
There is no value in a bachelor's degree in 10 years' time.
So millennials, or whatever this comes after millennials, this Generation Z, are going to be too savvy to go $200,000 in debt because they're going to watch their parents or older siblings complain about their student loans and say, you know what, screw it.
Yep.
I'm not going to drop $150,000 into debt to do this.
I mean, and
you
people,
buy that, May?
I don't know if I'm not as, steeped in the current, post-secondary or the secondary education market as you are. So I don't know for sure. I know that I look at the California system and, the University of California system is one of the best, if not the best, public university system in the world. And then the CSU system is a really important lifeline, particularly to working class students in the state.
Yes. So, and I do not want to undermine the value of certain degrees and the idea of going to college. Like, if college was tuned correctly to the job market, then it would make perfect sense. But the phrase is the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? Yeah. We are seeing the future of education right now in apprenticeship. So what we're doing is installing apprenticeship programs at cutting edge companies like Airbnb and HubSpot and MailChimp, and they're creating talent. There is no need for a college degree because what you're doing is giving people the trade skill they need plus the soft skills they need to be successful.
It's just an economic issue, right? Like, if college was half of what your first year salary was, or even equal to your first year salary, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to come out of school with, it's going to cost me $40,000 to go to college, $10K a year, and my first job is going to be $40 or $50K. It seems palatable, but when your first job's $40K and your
debt is
$150, and your potential home is $1 million.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. But even you're still giving up a huge amount of income potential. So if you come out of high school and you go an apprenticeship, you're going to immediately make income. You're going to immediately start paying income tax, and you're not going to have any student debt. And so you'll be able to save into a 401k. Right. And I've done the math. You basically end up earning over $2 million more in lifetime net worth.
Well, you're not starting in debt. You're starting with, even if it's de minimis, you're starting with some income.
Right.
It's interesting.
And then it grows.
I tweeted one time, and I was like, I'm going to do an apprenticeship. It's $50,000 a year. Send me your, kid, and I'll teach them how to be an angel investor. And then you send one, and I'll give one as a scholarship.
Somebody would be very smart to take that.
Do you know how many people respond? Like, a dozen people were like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "That was a joke."
No, that's the future of education.
But think about it. If you're some rich family and you got some kid who wants to be an investor,
do that.
How much would they pay to sit with you and, Alexis and Gary? $25,000 a year, $50,000 a year. They would pay that, some rich family, and then you just give one scholarship for every one you do.
Right.
I'm liking this apprenticeship thing.
Well, but so your job, now you're primarily an investor, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that you could apprentice somebody successfully and have them be successful without a college degree?
I think that we could, but we would need to probably retool about the way that we work. It's like, does everyone know how to manage someone who's learning on the job? Does someone know how to send their time that way?
But is a college graduate any different? They've not worked on the job.
Yeah. I don't think we don't have any recent college.
No, I think what Kim's saying, Kim would have to change how she does her job.
Yeah, we would have to change which is fine. It's just like it would also require changes to the institution and the workplace itself.
Yep.
Yeah, see, for me, my approach was they get to sit next to me in almost every meeting. That's it.
Totally.
I'm not going to talk to them.
Right.
They literally just get to sit next to me on either side in meetings. When I meet founders, don't talk.
Right, and it'd be one of the most valuable
Bring a
jobs you can do.
Moleskine, take notes.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer. But this is actually the ROI. We've calculated the ROI in apprenticeship, and it's over 600% for companies. Yeah. It's the future of education. So I think we'll see all this madness go away.
All right. I think I just want to say about the Google Dragonfly thing.
Let's touch on it.
I am super disgusted.
I'm super confused.
Okay, I'll explain it to you. They have an internal project.
Yeah. No, I
that
know
they're ashamed of.
Yeah.
And for the audience's case, you tell me if I think I got this right. There's an internal project called Dragonfly. They were creating a search engine for China that was using which maybe the Chinese government is in cahoots on this or not, but basically it gives the Chinese government control over search results, and they do really wacky stuff like pull the data for air quality when you do an air quality search from the state-owned monitors as opposed to the independent ones.
I was during the air event, I was looking up different air quality scores.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we're worse than China today. And then someone reached out to me who knew about this situation in Google, and they were like, this is your AQI is not accurate.
Everybody uses the American embassy's readings. But anyway, so everybody inside of Google is like, well, this is ridiculous. We don't want to work on it. And then today, Sundar was before Congress, and he said that they're not talking to the government about it, and they have no plans for it, even though they have hundreds of engineers working on it, which seemed to me to be convenient use of
confused.
Words.
It's like, I'm confused. It's like, I think there's a lot of people internally with that company who think that there's actually realistically no chance in, I'm not allowed to swear. There's no chance, a snowball's chance in whatever.
In heck.
That like the Chinese government would actually allow them to operate in China. So I'm very confused as to why they would take so much risk in the American political climate to do it.
Oh, okay, that risk. I was about to say there's no financial risk because they have more money than they know what to do with.
Yeah, I know, but why? I mean, there are people internal to Google who are like,
and Larry and Sergey don't know about it. That was complete nonsense.
Yeah,
they're claiming Larry and Sergey don't know about it. That's ridiculous. And if you were to launch it, you would be responsible for handing over journalists, independent thinkers, artists, professors, anybody who said anything wrong to the Chinese government to be tortured, imprisoned, or otherwise disappeared. And if you don't think that's true, check in with Yahoo, who had to hand over people who were using Yahoo Mail over there.
Yeah, it was a very famous case.
Yeah,
and
it's not okay.
Think about this. So anyway, they're not going to do it. I think it's too much internal pressure. But why would they actually do that? That's the weird thing. I think maybe they were taking a shot. And there is one group of people who thinks engagement is the way to deal with dictatorships. And what they haven't realized is what we learned with Saudi Arabia, with China, with any of these despots or dictators. If you enable them, they're just going to get 10 times worse.
Right.
You have to hold the line with a dictator because they have unchecked power in their own country. Unchecked power leads people to behave abhorrently. And the second you think that you're going to be able, just because we have financial ties with North Korea or Saudi Arabia, that is going to change the fundamental behavior of that leader, you're dreaming. Right. It's not going to.
No.
It's not going to. And
preach.
Facebook, my first job was at Amnesty International. I'm very passionate about human rights.
Yeah.
And Zuckerberg is so desperate to get in there and have Facebook in China that Zuckerberg would love to hand over anybody the Chinese government wants in exchange for getting that, billion plus people on his platform. That's how morally bankrupt Mark Zuckerberg specifically is. That individual named Mark Zuckerberg is begging them, learning Chinese. I mean, also his wife's Chinese, I believe. So I think he was learning it as well for that reason. But he went there to impress them on tours, speaking Chinese, doing Q&As in Chinese, specifically to try to convince the country to let him in. And he knows full well that all those DMs going back and forth, every profile, everything you search for, he's going to have to give to the government. And he would do it in a heartbeat. He is the worst type of American. He's the American who takes the American system and exploits it for everything it's got. And then other people who don't yet have democracy and freedoms, and he's willing to compromise them to make a quick buck. Can you imagine you have $50 billion personally, and then you want to go to China to imprison people and hand them over to the government? You have to be deranged to have that much money and think you need the next 50.
So I'm not defending
I don't want to go on a tirade.
And I appreciate hearing how you really feel.
No, it's disgusting to me that Google specifically would even consider it, to your point, Kim. Like, why?
But I just don't know. like, do they realistically think they have a shot of operating there from the like? I don't think the Chinese government would allow them to operate.
Do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, no, go on.
Do you think there's like a level of hubris that kind of comes with power? This idea of, well, we can get in, and then we can affect good change. Like if we
that's
can't
the
get
engagement argument,
right? And it's never. I feel like that's what's generally going on, and that's why I'm saying I'm not defending Mark at all, but I'm wondering if there's a deep.
You think Hitler?
I mean, there's.
Was interested in being engaged.
I don't know if it would be like. I don't know if it's a financial motivation so much as like the pride or hubris of connecting, putting every single person on the planet.
World domination.
That's what I think it's had more to do with that. Goal or achievement versus like the financial.
Yeah, and the fact that you would even see like that as an achievement to get a dictatorship or a country where people are put in jail for their religious beliefs or any beliefs potentially.
I mean, his role models are what Roman emperors. He looks back. Who was the name of the emperor that he praised?
Oh God, I'm not sure, but no, he was in his. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing about Mark. He's incredibly talented at copying other people's ideas and building a big organization. He has no moral compass or no understanding of the arc of history. None of that has hit him. So back to the college education, we're going to have free college education. You should have finished college and have just a better view of how the world works.
Right. Yeah.
The worst person you could ever put in charge of a global social network is Mark Zuckerberg.
It's interesting because you've been against Zuck for years. This goes way back.
Well, no, I met him and I was like, oh my God, this is the absolute worst person you could put in charge of this. He was just so awkward. When was
the first time you met him?
I met him at a TED conference. It was me at dinner. Larry Sergey, Ev Williams, and I think Salar from YouTube or early Google, Lori Park, and Mark Zuckerberg at dinner. And he couldn't make eye contact with me. He had nothing to say. But putting all that aside, I just like, this person just steals everybody's idea. I could see from the beginning. And I knew there wasn't much there. But when I saw him do things where he was tricking users, it was so obvious to me in the early days that he was trying to trick users. And then I saw him screw all his partners. So I was like, he screwed his own partners, Eduardo, whoever. Everybody was like in lawsuits with him. That doesn't happen by accident. Like if your first year of your startup, you're screwing all your co-founders, something's wrong.
It's not good.
Then he just flipped all the switches from private to non-private. And I was like, you're killing trust with users is what I said. We all drink from the same well, the same group of users. Don't screw it up. And that's exactly what he's done.
What's happened? It's truly hard to know people's hearts and minds. So I think we should remember that there's something we don't truly know his mind or heart, but I guess you just look, okay, where do we end up? And unfortunately it's in a spot where, there's a company with tremendous power and we're dealing with it.
It's very, I mean, it's complicated on so many different levels. Like if he so this is my legal understanding, and it probably since I'm not a lawyer, I mean, my understanding is that the multi-tiered stock structure that he operates Facebook. No, is he's got it, but it actually hasn't been tested fully at the Supreme Court level.
Oh yeah.
And so if he was to
he
make
has 10x voting power,
but if he was to make a set of long-term decisions that diminish the value of the company itself. In favor of doing something that might arguably be more healthy or holistic for the health of democracy, and then sacrifices
if you could actually do that.
I'm just saying that stock structure hasn't been tested.
Oh, that's interesting.
At a certain point, though, Ryan, you got to stop giving people the benefit of the doubt and just judge them based on their behavior.
Yeah.
True. And
it's the person who had a 20-year audit and a 20-year fine by the FTC and did not care.
Right. I mean, that's why I said ultimately that an individual saying Facebook has a black people problem. I do hold him accountable, right?
Yeah.
At some point you say, I guess you don't care,
Yeah.
It's tough.
Well, it also goes to unchecked power.
Also, I mean, the other thing, Facebook, the headquarters itself is located, flush to a historically African-American community.
East Palo Alto. Yeah. And now that's
it's
gentrifying
right
all the
it's
talent
right
could come from right there. Like, why are they not doing that?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. Apprenticeships, go.
All right. This has been an amazingly insightful, sometimes depressing, and super woke discussion. Thanks for having it with me.
I appreciate
Kim-Mai
you dropping
Cutler.
knowledge on housing.
I know. I love having
learned
Kim on the
a lot.
program. I'm just
Thank
like a
you.
sponge. She's
Yeah.
like, oh, and then in 1973,
Yeah,
and that's how
thank you
I was
for
like,
that.
I'm taking notes for my
Totally.
mayoral.
Yeah, you're Mayor Jason.
I'm
What if you
20%.
have to run against Mayor Kara?
Oh, we've had multiple dinners discussing this. We're going to do it together,
That would be
and we're going to debate
Exciting.
together. And then the question is, do either of us actually want the job? But the debates are going to be amazing. Kara and I have been friends for a long
Yeah.
time.
that would be great.
And she's definitely going to run. And I'm
Next year?
Oh, that'd be so great.
No, I think
Come
like
on.
after that.
I would
Yeah.
somehow
When is the
figure
next
out how to
mayoral?
Next year.
And then it's 5 years after that?
4 years.
4 years. So I think in 5 years, I think it would not be shocking if you saw myself and Kara debating
That
5 years from
That would
now.
be fun.
I just have to liquidate my Uber position so I don't have a conflict of interest.
Oh gosh.
But
Well,
yeah, in 5 years,
soon.
that would be perfect.
Okay. I would sign up for that debate.
Heck of a debate.
Yeah.
I'm basically going to pay Donald Trump in the debates to try to just get all the votes to her because I think people in San Francisco are going to be so appalled by my approach. They're going to be like, oh my God, that guy's like a mini
clever.
Giuliani, like a
Right.
mini Bloomberg.
Do not vote for him.
Do not vote for him. Or
or vote for him.
people
Oh,
might say,
gosh,
you know what?
please, no.
I'm going to say I voted for Kara, but I'm going to vote for that maniac because he's going to double the number of police.
Yeah.
That's going to be my number one thing. I'm doubling the number of police.
That's dark.
That is dark.
No, it's not. It's getting us per capita to where New York City and every other major city is.
Oh boy.
And we're not going to allow any crime in the city.
I love
and if
the
you
rabbit
commit
holes we
crime,
go down in this
whether
show.
you break a window or you steal a car, you're going to have to answer for crime. People in the city will not have to be subjected to the massive amount of crime going on here.
And on that note,
On that note, and you're not going to be able to own cars here anymore. Take an Uber, okay? Because my Uber shares are in a trust owned by my daughter, London, okay? I have no control. Don Jr. is controlling the Trump organization. Hey, thanks, Ryan Carson. Go ahead and check out treehouse.com. What is it? Still
Team Treehouse.
teamtreehouse.com, rather, and Treehouse on the Twitter. $25 a month still?
$25 a month. Yep. It's rock and roll. Go.
That's it.
Yep. We also have a really good online boot camp. It's $200 a month, best in the market. Check us out.
That's it? $50 a week?
Yeah. The more important thing is probably people listening to this are entrepreneurs. If you're actually trying to create a diverse team and create an inclusive company, Google Talent Path. Treehouse will help you out.
Talent Path.
Talent Path.
This is a product that Treehouse provides
Yeah.
in order to help you have apprenticeship programs.
Install
How do you
apprenticeships.
charge that? It's $10K a month or something? You manage it
We
for them?
just charge a company to install a whole system, and it's the.
What does it cost per year? $250,000?
I won't share, but it's profitable for us, and it's ROI
Hundreds
positive.
of thousands of dollars, let's say. Something in that range.
Yeah.
You had to take it seriously.
Yep, it's a real program.
How many
But
people are in that program?
We've got over 100 apprentices going through it. Our goal is
And you have 4 companies, 5 companies? in it?
10.
Wow.
Now it's growing.
It's going to be a bigger
crazy.
business than the online business, you think?
Yep.
Oh, that's
Yep.
interesting. MailChimp, you said, is doing it?
MailChimp, Vacasa, HubSpot, MindBody, Airbnb. It's great. And I think in 10 years' time, we're aiming for 500,000 apprentices. So
Good for you.
We're going for it.
Very exciting. What's it called again?
Talent Path.
Talentpath.treehouse.
Just Talent Path Treehouse. Google that.
Google it. You'll find it. Okay. All right. We'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.